Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The final lost child of Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII. Henry VIII's obsession to produce a male heir ended in bloodshed, heartbreak and horror. He was driven so greatly for a son that he believed would carry the Tudor dynasty throughout the next decades, and he wanted to ensure his family stayed on the throne for centuries. He's most remembered for his 6 wives, and one of the most tragic was Anne Boleyn, who was brutally beheaded inside the Tower of London following the king's frustration with her growing. The fact Anne could not produce the king the son he dreamed of led to Henry ordering Cromwell to find a way out of his marriage to his second wife. However, ironically, it would have been the daughter of Henry and Anne who would become the greatest monarch of the Tudor period, Elizabeth I, and who would defiantly defeat the Spanish Armada and rule during a great golden age. Elizabeth, Anne and Henry's daughter, was the queen the pair would be proud of, but Henry could not see anything past her gender. However, what is the story of Anne Boleyn's final lost child that secured her fate at the executioner's scaffold within the walls of the Tower of London? It's clear that on the 29th of January 1536, Anne Boleyn miscarried a child. It was mentioned in a letter by Imperial Ambassador to the Roman Emperor Eustace Chapuis, who was writing to Charles V on the 10th of February. He wrote, "On the day of the interment of the concubine had an abortion, which seemed to be a male child which she had not borne 3½ months, at which the king had shown great distress. The said concubine wished to lay the blame on the Duke of Norfolk, whom she hates, saying he frightened her by bringing the news of the fall of the king 6 days before. But it is well known that this is not the case, for it was told her in a way that she should not be alarmed or attach much importance to it. Some think it was owing to her own incapacity to bear children, others to fear that the king would treat her like the late queen, especially considering the treatment shown to a lady of court named Mistress Semmel, to whom, as so many say, he has lately made great presents. The princess's government, her daughters and a niece, have been in great sorrow for the said abortion, and have been continually questioning a lady who is very intimate with the princess, whether the said princess did not know that said news of the abortion, and that she might know that, but they would not for the world that she knew the rest, meaning that there was for some fear that the king might take another wife. The princess is well. She changed her lodging on Saturday last, and was better accompanied on her removal, and provided with what was necessary to her throne she had been before. She had an opportunity of disturbing arms on the way, because her father had placed around 100,000 crowns at her disposal. It is rumoured that the king, as Cromwell sent to inform me immediately after the queen's death, means to increase her train and exploit her position. I hope it may be so, and that no scorpion lurks under the honey. I think the king only waited to summon the said princess to swear to the statues in expectation that the concubine would have had a male child, in which they both felt assured. I know not what he will do now. I have suggested to the princess to consider if to be expedient, when she is pressed to take the oath, if she be reduced to extremity, to offer that if the king, her father, have a son, she will condescend to his will, and that she might at once begin throwing out some such hints to her gouvernante. I will inform you of her reply." This letter offers a great deal of insight into Chapuis's feelings about Anne Boleyn, referring to her as a concubine, and he talks of how upset the king was at her miscarriage of a son. It was this son that Henry believed would hopefully continue the Tudor dynasty, and it also would be this son that would probably save the head of Anne Boleyn. There were many possible reasons as to why Anne Boleyn miscarried her child. Giving birth in the Tudor times was incredibly dangerous and was very risky. The medical care was rather terrible, and very little was known about the prenatal care and about what a risk in terms of lifestyle for mothers. It could possibly be believed, though, that a contributing factor to Anne's failed pregnancy could be the stress she was under. There had been talk previously by the king to Cranmer and Cromwell about how he should get a divorce from Anne Boleyn. She knew that another failed pregnancy could have spelled her downfall, and she had a difficult pregnancy with her daughter Elizabeth, and it's likely this added to her worries. It's believed also that her final miscarriage occurred shortly after the king had a very terrible jousting accident. On the tilt yard, Henry was knocked out for 2 hours, and many thought he was dead. It's possible during this accident he suffered from a brain injury too, but this stress likely was a negative thing for Anne. A private note made by Charles Wriothesley also stated that the child that had passed away also was a boy and a male. This agrees with Chapuis that Anne miscarried a male child that was around 3.5 months old, in gestation. Wriothesley listed the date of this on his occurring as the 30th of January and said that she had reckoned herself at the time but was 15 weeks gone with child. Wriothesley's testimony is likely one that is truthful, as he was a trusted courtier and was prominent within the court at the time. However, what is doubtful is that at the time the gender of the child may not have been known at the weeks suggested by Wriothesley. Today, modern technology can detect gender in babies at around 16 weeks, even with the best equipment, and sometimes this is not the case. So what was the truth regarding the gender of this child? It's possible that many religious predictions were made about Anne's pregnancy, and that this was said to have been a boy, but it's impossible at this time for the correct gender to have been identified. There were claims later written that the poor young child suffered from some deformity, but this cannot be corroborated. Some may have claimed that Anne Boleyn's child was this way because they were attempting to slander her, or were trying to link her to witchcraft. This may have been 16th century defamation and propaganda spread against Anne Boleyn, and could have occurred during the reign of Mary I, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who was a victim of Henry VIII's marriage to Anne. Eustace Chapuis later wrote on the 25th of February 1536, clarifying more information about Anne's miscarriage. He said, "I learned from several persons of this court that for more than 3 months this king has not spoken 10 times to the concubine, and that when she miscarried he sacrously said anything to her, except that he saw clearly that God did not wish to give him male children, and in leaving her he told her, as if for spite, that he would speak to her after she was realized." The said concubine attributed the misfortune to 2 causes. First, the king's fall, and secondly, that the love she bore him was far greater than that of the late queen, so that her heart broke when she saw that he loved others, at which remark the king was much grieved. She has shown his feelings by the fact that during these festive days he is here, and has left the other at Greenwich, when formerly he could not leave her for an hour. It's clear, really, that the failed pregnancy was the beginning of the end for Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII. The pair were apart for some time after this, but following her miscarriage there were reports that Henry tried to persuade Europe to accept Anne Boleyn as the queen, but the loss of this child placed more stress on the relationship, and Henry's eye wandered towards Jane Seymour, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting. Ultimately, it was Cromwell who placed to work plotting Anne's downfall, as he spun a web of deceit and lies that saw her accused of adultery, treason and incest. On the 19th of May 1536, inside the walls of the Tower of London, Anne, having been found guilty of the charges, was brought to Tower Green. She walked up the scaffold and spoke to the crowd of roughly 200 people before she said goodbye to her ladies, and she faced the French swordsman who had come across the channel to take her head. In one swift blow the king had what he wanted, the end of the life of his second wife, so he could pursue a relationship with a woman he believed would give him a son, who eventually did, Jane Seymour. Anne Boleyn's final failed pregnancy helped towards her downfall, and this shows us how sick Henry VIII could really be. Rather than treating his poor wife with care and compassion regarding this traumatic event, he simply ordered his advisers to find him a way that he could rid himself of her. This does show the horrific brutality of one of history's most notorious and evil kings. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.